Hello, everyone. We're at the top of the hour now. We're at 10 o'clock Pacific time. My name is Wade Walker. Ooh, let me turn on my camera. There we go.
Hey, Wade, how you doing?
Good, Mike. How you doing today?
Good. Hanging in there. Hanging in there.
Rocking and rolling. So, hey, Wade Walker here, Director of Cloud Services for Big Green IT. And we've got Mike Procker, our Chief Operating Officer and VP of Cloud Services.
The only other guy on the screen.
The only other guy on the screen. Thank you for joining our webinar today and taking time out of your day. We'll be talking about Windows Virtual Desktop today, also known as WVD. So you hear that acronym a lot today. And for the past 10 years or so, we've been doing lunch and learns, live events in person, and being able to work with the community and see you live and face to face. And in this pandemic world, we're doing our best to recreate that lunch and learn live feel. We've been doing that we'll do that with our webinar today, and we've done that with our series of webinars that we started doing in the springtime when the pandemic hit. For today, we've chosen Windows Virtual Desktop, again, also known as WVD. We've done this because of all the course corrections we've all experienced this year in regards to basically, working from home. One stat that amazes me in this working environment in the pandemic is that last year around this time, less than 10% of people were working from home or considered work from home as their primary work environment. Now, nearly 2/3 of workers consider work from home their primary work environment. So of all the many stats we've seen this year, this one is one that absolutely blows me away. Who'd have thunk that nearly 67%, 2/3 of people would now consider work from home as their primary work environment. No surprise, this has changed the way people work, and we're all doing more Teams meetings, virtual presentations like this, Zoom meetings, virtual happy hours, and more. As a result, many businesses are looking at technologies like WVD to deliver a consistent work environment for their work and home employees that also gives an environment that balances the business needs of corporate security, regulatory compliance, while also giving it a consistent and positive user environment for their employees. So let's get started here. You can see the slide on today's agenda. So I'm doing the introduction again, Wade Walker here. Mike's going to be talking about Windows Virtual Desktop Cloud Workspace, going into Microsoft Azure's Windows Virtual Desktop, and then following up on NetApp's Virtual Desktop Services. And then after that, we will have a Q&A wrap-up session. You're going to field your questions as they come in, so feel free to open up the GoToWebinar applet. You can type in your questions there. I'll be moderating this. I'll be paying attention to the questions as they come in, and I'll interject during the time to have Mike or myself comment on that. We're also going to do some poll questions coming up, and then we'll answer questions afterwards. So after the end of this webinar, we'll stay on for as long as we can, and Mike and I will answer any questions you have. A little administrative stuff. You're going to get the slides emailed to you in PDF format later this week. So you don't have to write down or type, furiously all your notes. You're going to get this from us later this week. And then as again, a reminder, feel free to ask your questions along the way, raise your hand, do anything you can, send a carrier pigeon, a drone, or whatever it is to get our attention, and we'll answer your questions. And from that little overview again of who Big Green IT is, we like this quote here from one of our customers. Oops, it went away a little bit, Mike. We got your whole 3 screens.
Yeah, go ahead.
But Wood Rogers, one of our customers up and down the coast or up and down California, wanted to pass along their sincere thanks to us for helping them during this COVID-19 pandemic. They've got Teams working now, a lot of other technologies as well that can't put in here, but it's been great to work with them. They're a very valued customer. Big Green IT, we're headquartered in Rockland, California, which is a suburb of Sacramento. We also have offices San Diego, Los Angeles. I think we lost your screen again, Mike.
Coming. There you go.
No worries. Fastest growing company, 2017 Sacramento Business Journal. 3 years running, we've been the best places to work in Sacramento Business Journal. So we do have a great work environment. It's an awesome place to work. We're a Microsoft Gold platform in a number of Microsoft technologies. We are considered a tier 1 partner where we can transact directly with Microsoft and you. And we're what's called a managed partner. So we have a whole team at Microsoft that we work with. As our CEO likes to say, we can bring up the bat phone and call any of our contacts at Microsoft, be it engineers, people that wrote the code for some of these solutions, including Windows Virtual Desktop. And we're a member of Microsoft's data center optimization team. So Mike and I are on weekly, bi-weekly meetings with the DCO team to talk all things Azure, all things WVD, and get guidance and direction on these products, and then what's happening with these products and their roadmap. And on the bottom here, you're going to see a sampling of some of our clients. So we range from small clients up to clients that are over 10,000 people. So that's a good overview of who we are. And now, let me look at my other screen. I'm going to start the first poll question. So when this question comes up, please do us a favor of just answering this question. It's a simple yes/no question. So I just launched it. You just go ahead and click yes on there. I think you should see an OK button. I don't see another button, but go ahead and click on that. I see the responses coming in. And as we typically see, it's about a 2/3 or 2/3 yes, 1/3 no. Sometimes it's even 50% yes, 50% no. This gives us a good feeling for just how many people are using Azure right now, and then if you're looking to use Azure, where you want to go. And so let me give this another. It's 10:07. Let me give this another few seconds. But it looks like the results are pretty much saying about a 2/3 ratio. About 65% are using Azure. The other 35% aren't yet, which is great. I'm going to close this poll now. And I'm going to do one more poll. This is going to be launching right now. Have you deployed Windows Virtual Desktop or any other virtual desktop infrastructure solution? That could be VMware, Horizon, Citrix, the list goes on. Oh, this is coming in higher than I thought. We're about 80% yes, 75% yes. Okay, so this topic is then obviously a good fit for this audience. So thank you for those results. I'm going to close this poll here in a few more seconds, but I appreciate your feedback because that again helps us know that what the audience is expecting from Mike and I during the presentation. So straight up 75%, 20 yes, 25% no. So thanks for that. I'm going to close the poll now. And then let's get started. So we're going to hit onto our subject matter expert, Mike Proctor here. I'm going to put myself on mute. Again, Mike's our COO and VP of Cloud Services. Mike, you ready to roll?
Yep. I'm going to drop myself off the screen here, make a little more room for the actual presentation. And we'll get going. So thanks, everybody. And real quick, I have a handful of slides, not too many. It's pretty short, succinct little presentation here. But Wade is going to be monitoring the chat and looking for questions. Please go ahead and stop us along the way if you have a question that's pertinent. I prefer to address those and bring it up, where everybody can benefit from, some information that isn't built into the presentation that, if it's relevant enough for you to ask a question, it's probably relevant for everybody to hear. So please feel free to reach out along the way. And I've left plenty of time to stop and address things along the way as they come up. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to be referring to Microsoft Azure, obviously based on the poll results. Most of you know this, but Azure is Microsoft's public cloud. It powers all of our infrastructure, corporate infrastructure, Microsoft 365, Xbox, and of course, Windows Virtual Desktop. Azure is the largest cloud on the planet, over 60 regions and 140 countries around the world, and only the internet itself is actually bigger than Azure. Another piece to keep in mind is Azure isn't really just the cloud for Microsoft stuff. In fact, more than half of the virtual machines running in Azure today are running some flavor of Linux. And Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, calls it the world's computer. And the reason he calls it that is because not only is this just a big place to host virtual machines, we've all known about data centers for decades now, where you take stuff out of your closet and put it in somebody else's. But more and more of the applications and services running in Azure are running in microservices or via Azure Functions, basically code running on Azure itself. And that's really the future of the cloud. And that's how cloud becomes important and relevant to most companies. WVD, in fact, wouldn't exist if it weren't, well, not in the way that it does today. It wouldn't be as unique, powerful, cost-efficient, and highly functional as it is if it weren't for the fact that a lot of the underlying services are running in Azure as platform services, which really makes the product what it is today and brings it to you the way that we can. So WVD, Windows Virtual Desktop, the modern way to work. That's the title of the site. But even before COVID-19, more and more businesses have been slowly increasing the size of their remote workforce. As internet connectivity options continue to improve, workers expect more and better ways to get their work done from wherever they are and with whatever device they happen to be using at the time. Since the pandemic, of course, the rate at which businesses have been making this change has just shot through the roof. Now, if we take a look at some of the numbers on this slide here, we can see by just by how much. Wade's already kind of spoiled this slide for me. 66% of workers, 2/3, were working from home in April of this year. Now, of course, as some industries in certain parts of the country and around the world slowly shift back to pre-pandemic work habits, this number has been falling. But we've seen many businesses adopt permanent new policies and strategies surrounding working from home. Some companies, including Twitter, Facebook, Shopify, Square, and even Microsoft, have publicly announced that they will allow their staff to work from home forever in some shape or form. During the early days of COVID, we quickly came to realize that there just were not enough physical devices available in the marketplace for companies to supply their newly remote workforce. The instant jump in equipment requirements just overran the supply chain. Now that things have settled down quite a bit, plenty of organizations will continue to supply their workers with lockdown, company-owned devices to bring home the way that they used to in the past. However, more and more are recognizing the benefits of allowing their workers to use their own devices or even less powerful consumer devices to do their work. Remote desktop delivery makes this possible in a highly secure fashion with excellent performance. This remote desktop delivery has moved into a new era now. Before, we used to do this with RDS or server-based VDI on premises or in a local data center. And today, we can do the whole thing in the cloud. So let's say you understand all this, based on the last poll result. 3/4 of you have either dealt with or are currently have deployed some form of VDI or something like that. So you get this, you know that there's other ways to support a remote workforce. I'm sure you know that there have been all kinds of remote delivery options around for a long time. Maybe, 75% of you have been part of a POC or a successful or less successful VDI deployment. That experience, I'm sure, has highlighted what's truly important to your organization and the most critical areas for you to focus on. For example, you need to support your remote workforce. Obviously, you'll need to enable employees to work from almost anywhere, but you'll also need the flexibility to support different worker roles by offering a tailored experience for each job function. As part of this, you're going to want to simplify access to the specific applications and data that those workers need. You want to keep your technology current and keep your costs down. Today's CIOs, they expect digital transformation to enable lower costs, and remote working is not an exception. You need to make sure you stay secure and compliant. Ransomware and other forms of cybercrime are still rampant, and you'll need to mitigate risks from employee-owned devices and unsanctioned applications. You can't tolerate lost information, stolen information. You might even have strict compliance requirements that you need to consider. And finally, you're going to want to streamline systems management. You probably oversee an increasingly complex environment that includes steady data growth, along with security, device, user, and application management concerns. Previously, virtualized environments had been limited to remote desktop sessions delivered by on-premises servers. Whether you're talking about VMware or Hyper-V, Citrix or RDS, these deployments were expensive and could be complex. In order to give you good performance at peak usage times, I'm sure you all have experienced the dreaded boot storms, you would need to over-engineer the entire deployment, making sure there was enough extra compute power, storage performance, and network capacity to handle utilization spikes. This meant that most of the time you were paying for resources that were highly underutilized. And the smaller your environment, the more of an impact that overhead had on the total cost of the deployment. That is a big reason why we didn't see very many effective VDI deployments under 1,000 seats or so. Another option was purchasing desktop as a service from some service provider. And while this could often make the per user pricing a lot more palatable, it also reduced the overall flexibility and forced companies into making selections from a small menu of choices. After all, the service provider was still dealing with the same technology on the back end that we've already discussed and couldn't really allow any given client to really stray too far outside of the box that they gave you. I'll now enter Windows Virtual Desktop. WVD provides the same full desktop experience in the cloud that users get on their local PCs, including familiar Microsoft 365 applications right alongside your standard legacy line of business or industry-specific software. With Windows Virtual Desktop, you gain a comprehensive desktop experience in the cloud that enables you to optimize costs, safeguard business information, and provide a modern remote experience while streamlining IT management. So what actually makes WV different? I can say all these things, but how does it actually become better, newer, different than all the other things? Well, I'm going to dive deeper on the next few slides into a few key points. WVD delivers the only multi-session Windows 10 experience. This is not just a desktop experience on Windows Server. WVD is optimized for Microsoft 365 from a licensing and from a performance perspective. You can easily migrate your existing Windows Server and RDS desktops and applications into WVD. And WVD works with hybrid and existing on-premise solutions. WVD can finally be deployed in minutes, and scaling up or scaling out can be managed automatically. WVD leverages brand new technologies to reduce or eliminate many of the costs associated with traditional RDS and VDI deployments. Since WVD is true multi-session Windows 10, there's no Windows Server licensing required. Your session hosts just run Windows 10 only. Modern Windows 10 licenses include all the necessary entitlements for users to access WV desktops. So whether you've got an EA with software assurance, one of the Microsoft 365 plans that includes Windows 10, or even just a simple $7 a month Windows 10 Enterprise license, your WVD access is included right alongside your regular desktop Windows installation at no extra cost. The WVD service, it eliminates the common components associated with RDS and VDI, such as the gateway servers, connection broker servers. That functionality is fully managed by Microsoft and included in the WVD service, and it's covered by that regular Windows 10 license that I just talked about. With Windows Virtual Desktop, you pay only for the session hosts and Azure storage consumed by the users during their use of the service. Since WVD runs in the Azure cloud, you automatically take advantage of on-demand pricing for the compute resources necessary. No more paying for 2x or 5x capacity continuously in order to handle bursts. Additionally, with live scaling functionality enabled by the NetApp VDS service, we can reduce costs even further. And finally, there are free clients available to connect to WVD for nearly any internet-connected device. Since the desktop itself is running natively in the Azure cloud, you're going to get the same snappy performance regardless of screen size. One of the most popular and important reasons to employ a remote desktop solution is the enhanced security that it provides. A well-constructed remote desktop solution enables workers to have full access to potentially sensitive company and customer data without requiring the company to ever relinquish control over that data. Regardless of the device that is used to view or manipulate the information, your company is always in control. WVD enhances that concept by layering on the security and compliance features included with Microsoft 365 and Azure. Microsoft invests more than $1 billion annually on cybersecurity research and development in order to keep your cloud data safe. Access to WVD is handled by Azure Active Directory and includes multi-factor authentication. And in addition to that, a team of more than 3,500 global cybersecurity experts are dedicated to protecting your business assets and data in Azure. Every day, Microsoft analyzes over 6.5 trillion signals in order to identify emerging threats and protect their customers. And Microsoft supports over 90 compliance offerings, more than any other cloud provider, to help your organization comply with national, regional, and industry-specific requirements governing the collection and use of data. A cost-effective and secure remote desktop solution isn't terribly useful if the user experience isn't up to par. Fortunately, WVD starts with the tried and true Windows RDP protocol and then adds in the specific features and functionality that are most important for a modern workplace experience for today's remote workforce. WVD clients are available for desktops, Windows, Mac, and Linux, tablets and phones, iOS and Android, and you can also use any modern browser with a fully featured HTML5 client. WVD enables enhanced sessions with connectivity to local resources and real-time resizable windows. And the RDP protocol gives you high refresh rates for video broadcasting without requiring excessive host CPU cycles, like you might find in a Citrix deployment. With a desktop client, users don't need to know any IP address or other configuration information. All they do is sign into their account with username and password, and preferably MFA, and they will automatically see only the apps and or host pools that your company has assigned to them. Other clients just browse to a standard URL and log in. WVD includes several enhancements targeted directly at Microsoft 365 users. So by leveraging virtualized profile container technology acquired from FSLogix in 2019, users can experience the same performance in Outlook and OneDrive as they would on a standard desktop machine. The same profile container technology enables enhanced redundancy and allows for the elimination of yet another Windows server when used with Azure files or Azure NetApp files. And finally, WVD brings the best possible calling and conferencing experience with Teams media direction. So this is a kind of a big deal. This feature is only available with Teams on WVD, and it enables the user's Teams client to connect directly the audio video stream directly to the other participants' Teams clients. What that does is it bypasses the WVD infrastructure entirely and dramatically reduces latency and jitter. So this gives your Teams users an audio video experience on par with a regular Teams call between two computers. So I've spent the past few minutes talking about how WVD can be a great solution for your company. It's safe, secure, it's easy for your users, and it's priced right to boot. The architecture of WVD eliminates RDP gateways and connection brokers and gives you the option to eliminate the file server for user profiles. Every server you eliminate is another server you don't have to purchase, rent, or patch. Meanwhile, the parts you do have to deal with, compute, storage, networking, those are managed by Microsoft in Azure, so there's still no physical hardware for you to worry about. As always, it's easy to expand capacity with Azure resources as your company's needs grow or shrink. You aren't locked into a large, expensive deployment.
Hey, Mike, we've got it. Can I interrupt for the?
Yeah. Fire away.
So back to that Teams.
Yeah,
back to that Teams
media redirection
discussion. Yeah, the media redirection.
That's right.
So a question came in. Is this the Teams client on their own personal computer, like their own laptop, or is this the Teams client actually installed in WVD?
No. So the way this works, I'll elaborate a little. First of all, right now today, it's only the Windows desktop client. There may or may not be plans to bring this functionality to other clients. But in the Windows desktop client, and this is not a preview feature, this is in production. So whatever device you're using to connect to WVD, that's Teams client. So the one that's directly connected to the speakers, microphone, and webcam, the RDP stream of that client is connecting to the RDP stream or to any other client that has media redirection involved. So it's not the one in. So basically, what you're doing is you're bypassing the WVD infrastructure and just going. It's kind of the way that a modern SIP or voice over IP call works. Now what happens is the SIP, the connectivity is established by the servers and the entire infrastructure together, and then once that connection is established, the media is routed UDP over the shortest path possible. And there's a bunch of decisions made by the software to make that happen. But as long as media redirection is enabled, then that Teams client will eliminate the hops that would be necessary to route it through the actual WVD server host.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. And so anyway, I was just finishing up that, of course, it's easy to expand if you need to make your environment bigger, or contract if you need to make the environment smaller, because it's all in Azure. So you're not locked into some big expensive deployment. And even if you want to do a proof of concept for a department, to kick the tires, we can do it with WVD and it won't break the bank. And if you decide you don't want to do it or you're not ready yet, then we just turn the whole thing off. The optional NetApp VDS service is an add-on piece that we've been using quite a bit here at Big Green IT, and that service provides another layer of management and control. There's a whole suite of management things you can do with the VDS service, including running custom scripts and different stuff that can come in really handy. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation, but one thing that's relevant to pretty much anybody that's using WVD is their live scaling. Live scaling is it's a VDS feature. It controls which hosts, if any at all, are on and available for connection based on time of day, day of week, and the actual utilization at that time. So by reducing the number of available hosts, or even powering them off completely, you can save another 40% or so, which is quite a big deal. There's other ways to enable simple host management on-off stuff with runbooks and other integrations as well. But VDS reacts to actual user sessions in progress in addition to the predetermined schedules you may have in place. Another cool feature is you can give select end users, you want to give it to everybody obviously, but you can give some end users a simple website that they can log into. It's part of the VDS service. So if they need to access their WVD resources outside of normal hours, they can go to this website, log in, turn stuff on or off, and not even have to go anywhere near your Azure deployment. So they can safely activate the resources they need without having to involve IT and without exposing your Azure underpinnings to them, which could be potentially dangerous. So that's pretty much it. Well, it's not it. Sorry, I have 2 slides out of order, but actually, let me go back and then I'll come back. I'm sorry about those out of order ones. Real quick, let me talk about Microsoft licensing, everybody's favorite topic. Most of our clients deal with this as infrequently as you possibly can, which makes sense. Nobody really likes to talk about this stuff, but we talk about it all the time. We have experts on staff that understand how this stuff works, and we know how the old licensing methods like open volume and enterprise agreements work, as well as all the new stuff, cloud service provider and other modern licensing options. And there's a lot of money to be saved by setting up your licensing the right way, whether it's for legacy on-prem software, Microsoft 365, Azure, any of that stuff, we can definitely help with all of it. For example, if you've looked at any of the Microsoft 365 stuff, you've probably seen their popular bundles. You've seen E1s and E3s, Business Premium, Business Standard, etc. Those bundles are actually they're great for they're great for most customers. In fact, they save you quite a bit of money over the individual components one at a time, and they make it easy to consume. And it's easy for someone to look and jump in and find a bundle that makes sense. However, there are frequently, and the larger the company, the more this is true, there are frequently employees in your company that don't need all of that stuff. Maybe they're never going to use it. Maybe you've got some people that are installation folks or delivery folks that are never going to use the desktop software, so why pay for it? So by mixing and matching those individual SKUs with the bundles, we can save a bunch of money, and that's something we work with all our customers on. There's the enterprise versus the business bundles. Similar, however, there's some limits on the business side. Generally, companies right around 300 or so people is when you start looking to move into enterprise, but you don't always have to. Again, we can do some mixing and matching there and get creative. Open volume for people that just want to keep adding stuff to that open volume agreement, we can help with that. If you've got an enterprise agreement, or even if you're a very large, we put new customers in enterprise agreements today still when they're 2,000, 3,000 employees, because there are still some products where that's the cheapest way to buy it, and when that's the cheapest way to buy it, then that's what we'll help you do. One of the more popular things surrounding enterprise agreements is for companies that have them now but aren't really large enough anymore, or the Microsoft usage requirements for an enterprise agreement have continued to increase over the years, so maybe they've shifted beyond what you're now capable or you now qualify for. We can migrate your software assurance benefits off of that EA onto a less restrictive MPSA agreement, combine that with CSP licensing for your users, and achieve kind of the best of both worlds. And then, other segments, nonprofit, government, education, definitely you all get special pricing. We know how all that stuff works, and we can help you out there. As I've touched on a couple times, we are a direct tier 1 cloud service provider with Microsoft, which gives us all kinds of flexibility and access to promos and pricing to help you out there. And then finally, we do offer software asset management services for your Microsoft licensing and for select other vendors as well. So if you found yourself in the software police, software jail, and you need help out of there, or you just want to stay out in the first place, we can help you with services to get that done or keep it from happening. And of course, there is a list of licenses that are eligible or include Windows Virtual Desktop right out of the gate, and we know what those are, and we can help you decide how to take advantage of it.
Mike, we've got a question about WVD costing.
Yeah, fire away.
All right, so just basically a question is, how do we know how much WVD is going to cost?
So we have a cost calculator that we use. It takes into account the rough number of hours per day. If you're an 8 to 5 sort of business or a 24/7 sort of shop, takes into account what type of applications you use. So we have engineering firms on WVD that need access to GPU-enabled hosts because they're running AutoCAD and other machines that really need the horsepower of the GPU to make it work. And then we have the bulk of our customers are Office customers that are using Outlook and the Office applications mostly exclusively. Well, pick one. And those types of users have very different needs. So we collect that information from you, number of users, and based on that information, we can get a pretty good estimate of how much storage you'll need and how many host servers you're going to need and of what type in order to satisfy your performance requirements. Then we use the scheduling information based on how often your environment needs to be running. We throw that in there as well, and we come up with a calculator. The licensing piece is the easiest part because it's just per user, and that can be a couple of bucks. It can be free, or it can be $7 or somewhere in that general range, depending on what you already own. Most of the time when we have this conversation, people already own the WVD entitlements for all or at least some chunk of their company. If you're looking for a ballpark, the total all-in cost can be as low as $20 a user, And for tiny deployments, it could get up into the 60, if you got 2 users or something, it might be 60 or 70 bucks per user, but you're, in a tiny deployment. Like anything else, cloud-based like this, or even not cloud-based, there's a certain amount of infrastructure you need. WVD reduces that infrastructure quite a bit, but you still need some, and there are economies of scale that come into play with larger deployments. So, a range of 20 to 80 isn't super helpful, but we can get almost anybody in under $50 per desktop or so per month, and those are really loose, but hopefully that gives you some idea.
Perfect. I'll reply to that, and then we have another question, which might be better for the end of the presentation, but it's regarding the recent Office 365 service impairments, and if there's a hybrid type solution of WVD to deal with those recent Azure Active Directory / Office 365 service impairments.
Right. So an Office 365 outage specifically wouldn't affect WVD. There's a giant asterisk next to that, which is the most recent outages were Azure Active Directory outages specifically, and those would have taken out normal URL access to the WVD service. Now, there are other ways to, we can set up other ways to authenticate for WVD access. Whether or not that would have been terribly useful if it enabled your users to get into an Office 365 deployment that also didn't work, that's questionable. But out of the box, what you get right now, Azure Active Directory having a problem would prevent you from accessing WVD. There are ways around it, but they would need to be, designed in up front.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Cool. All right. Well, that's basically it for me, barring any more questions. The last thing I'll talk about is this slide here. A couple of WVD offers that we have in market right now. Can't believe I just said in market. So all of our new WVD customers that are taking advantage of VDS, we will set up and configure that environment for a flat one-time fee of $995. And if anybody's ever paid for engineering, that's not very many hours, and that's actually quite a good deal. And even to layer onto that, if you're doing WVD and you're going to be using Azure NetApp files, which is that's the premier high-speed storage that really starts to make not just performance sense, but cost-effective sense as well once you get over 50 or 60 users. If you're using an Azure NetApp files deployment, we'll go ahead and set up the WVD deployment for free. So those are two offers that are here. I don't think we've mentioned yet that you're going to get the slide deck at the end. It'll be mailed out to you, so you'll have access to all of everything you've seen. Plus, you'll be able to see these two offers here as well. Wade may have some other stuff to talk about too, but barring any questions, that's it for me.
Got two more things here on VDS. One is it needed for Windows Virtual Desktop? And then two is, if I already have Windows Virtual Desktop, can I add VDS to that Windows Virtual Desktop environment?
Sure thing.
Sorry to bombard you with two questions at once.
No, I love it. No, this is a presenter's dream come true. I mean, somebody's actually paying attention.
We've got more. We're not done yet.
Okay. The answer to number one is no. VDS is completely optional, not required, and nearly everything I talked about in the presentation is available to you without VDS. VDS enables some cool functionality that is much more difficult and more involved to do on your own. VDS in and of itself does not do anything that's completely magic and undoable in Azure on your own. However, we have found that a lot of our customers, WVD might be the first really serious Azure thing they do. And Azure is incredibly flexible, but it's different. If you've ever seen the way that the blade interface works, popping in and out, to do advanced stuff, you need to learn a fair amount of PowerShell. And if that's your first foray into Azure, the VDS console gives you a more familiar GUI-based environment for IT admins and some power users to work with their environment without having to, wade into without having to wade into the deep end of the Azure pool. And so it can be very useful, but it's completely not necessary. The way that it works is there's a small server that's installed into your Azure environment. It's like a $30 a month server, and we always include that cost when we, when we're doing full price analysis to make sure it makes sense. But they install a platform management server. It's not required to be functional. It doesn't, prevent things from people from accessing the service, but it enables a bunch of extra functionality. We can add that into a running environment. It connects to your Azure Active Directory, and that's how it. And then it actually is connected to the control plane of Azure, so it has control over your host servers. But we can put it into a working environment, and we can rip it out of an environment without tearing anything down or getting in the middle of it. That was a very important key to us when we selected NetApp VDS. It actually used to be called Cloud Jumper. They were acquired by NetApp not too long ago. We selected that tool specifically because it enables, we can put it in and rip it out without hurting things. There are other tools available that have similar functionality, but they didn't meet those requirements. Hopefully I didn't go too far off the rails there.
Oh, that's good. Another good question we have is, and the questions are coming in, so I super duper appreciate this. I'm just going to read this verbatim. Can we get rid of our on-prem domain controller / Active Directory and move to Azure domain services as our directory, Azure Directory as a service, without replication from our existing on-prem domain controllers?
Why, yes, you can. In fact, that is another reason that I say that this could be a lot of companies' big foray into Azure. If you're coming from Microsoft 365, and let's say you've been in that ecosystem for a while, maybe you've made it this far and never had a domain controller. No problem. So we still use it as a company. Our accounting department and a couple of other people still have to use like 2 legacy tools that are not SaaS based. And so, we used to have, well, we still do, but we had 2 servers sitting up in Azure that 3 or 4 people would have to get into to do their job. And we don't have any domain controllers. But our personal WVD environment is running exactly that way. It uses Azure Active Directory domain services, and you log in and you're on WVD.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Let's see. When I'm answering this question to you, John, right now, are our customers providing hardware for the remote users, like buying them PCs, or letting them use their personal devices? If our customers are letting them use personal devices, what are the security risks?
So all of the above. So Big Green IT, we're not a CDW or a big hardware shop where we don't have rooms full of cardboard boxes that we're shipping in and out of there. However, we do a lot of one-stop shop for our customers to prevent them from having to navigate that whole thing. We're in the Surface as a Service. That's a tough one to say. Surface as a Service program. So we have a fair number of customers that take advantage of that. So they have fresh Microsoft Surface devices that they can use. We also are, a Lenovo, Dell, HP, that stuff as well. So we can provide equipment. Our customers, so there are, if you're going to be providing your own equipment, there's some other Microsoft pieces. Microsoft Intune, for example, gives you access to automatic machine setup and deployment with the, forgot it, wait, I'll remember what it's called. What's the
Autopilot?
Thank you, Autopilot. So that we can do that, and we do have customers that are doing that. It's about 50-50 with our customers that are doing that for WVD versus ones that are letting their own employees use their own devices. The main thing about WVD is that you can do a WVD deployment where that user has no ability to put any information on their local machine at all. It is just a thin client. could be a Windows thin client, a Mac thin client, Linux thin client, whatever it is. And you can have WVD work in such a way that there's no additional security risk because everything is in the WVD session. And that's a big thing for a lot of people. That was a big thing with, if you need to go from 20 work from home users to 2,000 work from home users, out of that 2,000, probably 17 or 1,800 already had a suitable device where you could jump onto WVD right now, tomorrow. No shipping, no provisioning, nothing. You go to a URL and use the web client, you can get there from anywhere immediately. And if you want a richer experience, then your IT department would have to help make sure they got the right remote desktop clients installed. So it's a little bit of effort, but you can do that on almost any device. So zero effort is let them use the HTML5 web client. A little bit of effort is push out just the RDP client install, which is a single install file. And then more involvement would be, closer to a legacy deployment where you're sending them a laptop or sending them a machine or something. And that's if you really, really, really want complete lockdown and control. But even in a browser session, you have a lot of control over the information. Aside from people taking, screenshots, which nobody can prevent. Anybody can hold their cell phone up and take pictures of what they're doing. But aside from that, you can control everything else in even a browser WVD session.
So the questions are just coming in, which is great. Does this support Mac OS, either virtual Mac OS or remote Mac OS, and maybe even expand to iOS and Android?
Okay, it depends. If you're saying on the hosted side, clearly not, because it's Windows Virtual Desktop, not anybody else's. So if you want to know what clients can access your Windows desktops, then it's yes to all of them. There's a Windows, a Mac, and a Linux desktop client. There's an Android and an iOS mobile client, and any modern web browser that supports HTML5 can also access it. So you can get to your Windows desktops with pretty much any internet connected device that any sane person would try to use.
But a native Mac application running on a Mac wouldn't necessarily be able to run on this unless it could run in Windows.
Would absolutely not work, period, unless you have a Mac emulator running in Windows on your Windows host, which sure. Yeah, it's not the whole, the actual software running on the host servers is Windows 10.
Right.
So the only way Mac is going to run on it is if you have a way to run your Mac application on a Windows machine. If you can do that, then yes, it's supported. But the key to remember is that at the core of this thing, it is Windows 10 that is running at the host.
Yep. Next question, does this support multi-monitors?
Yes, no problem.
How many monitors are you running?
Me? I'm only running 2. I'm running 2, but I've had 3 hooked up to it before.
I run 3, and so when I connect to our Windows Virtual Desktop, NetApp VDS environment, then it goes to all 3 of my monitors. And then lastly, back on the security, there's a security question, work from home. Either whether it's our customers or just people we know that are friends of ours, many companies are thinking of growing their bring your own device environment for their employees. And they might give them $1,000 stipend a year, whatever it is a year. And Jane Doe or John Doe, he or she brings a device, and they get to bring their own device. It's a Mac, it's a Surface Pro, it's a Dell, it's a Lenovo, whatever it is. And then he or she then connects into that Windows Virtual Desktop environment, and then the company doesn't have to worry about that capital purchase or whether it can necessarily CapEx or OpEx, but that company can deliver the full compute experience to somebody, whether they're on Windows, Mac, a tablet, so on and so forth.
WVD, sorry to expound on that. WVD is it's a Mac users and a Mac administrator's dream come true, because it fixes 2 problems at once. It allows the Mac users to work on their premium Mac device, and by having, especially if you're using additional monitor, you take your Windows Virtual Desktop, you throw it up over on another monitor, you're looking at your soft rounded glow of Mac wonderfulness on your main screen all day long, but your business applications are over here on the other screen. you have both at the same time, they're super happy because they are not forced to use a dreaded Windows machine in order to do their work. They win. And the IT administrator doesn't have to manage your Mac. Windows admins absolutely hate all of the extra hoops and extra jumps because the Mac ecosystem is its own thing. If you're a 100% Mac shop, then you have your own tools to manage that with. But most people aren't fortunate. Usually they are a Windows shop that has got a handful of Mac people they have to deal with, and it's always a whole nother thing. Now, you don't manage the Mac machines. They're not trusted. They're not anything. They don't have access to your corporate data at all. They're your own nightmare. They got your kids' pictures in your iTunes and whatever you got going on, fine. We're going to serve you all of the corporate content and data through through WVD. Mac, everybody wins. So it's as backward as it sounds. Windows Virtual Desktop is, in my opinion, the best thing that can happen to a Macintosh in a corporate environment.
Yeah. And if you read some of the industry analysis out there, a lot of companies are thinking of reducing their physical real estate because of people working from home, and then reducing their spend on people's computers because now we're moving into a service-based environment where you, IT departments, vendors like us provide a Windows environment with all the applications, and the person gets it from wherever they want to work on whatever device they want. Another question we have is, does WVD support user-specific desktop profiles?
Absolutely. I mean, yes. So I didn't get deep into profile containers, but this is a good segue. So the way FSLogic's profile containers work, so every user, when you log onto Windows and you have your profile that contains everything, it's got your Outlook cache, your OneDrive cache, all of your personal settings, desktops, your own files, etc. That's all in your user profile. And in order to make a distributed system like this work well, you don't want that profile sitting on one host machine. In a large environment, depending on when you log on and log off, you could be on host 1, 2, 10, 20, 40. You never know what host you're going to hit. So what happens in a virtualized container deployment, which is how FSLogix works, included with all WVD, big part of what makes WVD great, by the way. So what actually happens is your profile is a container, and it lives in a VHDX file. So it lives in a Hyper-V container on a different system. There's 3 places in WVD where we can put that container. We can put it on a file server, which is very similar to how RDS deployments worked a year and a half ago. We can put it on Azure Files, or we can put it on Azure NetApp Files. Those last 2 are essentially platform as a service storage systems that are native, built into Azure. It eliminates yet another Microsoft Windows server to deal with, no patches in AV or any of that stuff. So you get that out of the way. You're just buying for the storage you're using for those containers. There's pros and cons to all of these. You could talk for hours and drive everyone to sleep, but save that for an actual conversation. But anyway, because those profiles are living on a network connected location that is not the host, as soon as you log on to the host goes, oh, Mike's here. Where's Mike's container? It's over there. And it immediately connects you to that container. Now, this is key. Anybody that's worked with roaming profiles remembers how that worked. It found your roaming profile, and then you waited for 372 hours while it tried to drag all of your information and 400 gigs of email and everything else down over the wire, load it up into the machine, and then you could finally log on and actually do something after your 3rd cup of coffee. So this does not work like that. It doesn't pull anything down. It doesn't load anything into the local machine, doesn't do any of that stuff. That container that's running on that file server, NetApp Files, wherever it is running, and it just connects to it. So it's like connecting to a VM that's up. So as soon as it makes the connection, you now have a connection to that data, and it is ready to go. So your login times are instant, not instant in IT terms, but they're essentially instant, and you're up and running regardless of what host you connected from. And importantly, it supports all of the kind of weird stuff that was tough to support in an RDS environment with Office 365 3 years ago. OneDrive local cache and all the weird things it does with files on demand. Outlook cached profiles. Anybody 75% of you that have dealt with VDI and RDS deployments in the past, remember, the first thing you ever did when a user complained about Outlook was march on up to the desktop and turn off cache profiles because it broke everything because of all that other profile stuff. Not anymore. You can now have your cache profile. By default, WVD tells you to leave a month's worth of information cached there by default, but you can change it with the GPO. And so it's cached on your profile container, which is just one network hop away. And then beyond that, it goes out to the cloud because you don't want to fill your profile container storage with everybody's full Outlook email boxes. So it's a great compromise between lightning fast, on-premise type of cached Outlook performance and having access to 27 years and 1 million terabytes worth of email data that your CEO still won't ever let go of. So it gives you a great compromise between those two.
And then related to this, Mike, somebody asked about they've had some noticed some performance issues with profile stuff on Azure files. So can you maybe hit on Azure NetApp files, or I mean, you know where this is going.
Yeah. Item number one, if you're using Azure files, it's got to be premium storage. If it's not premium storage, we need to make it premium storage. That's number one. Azure files itself, the non-premium version, is designed, it works great, but it's designed more like a USB hard drive sitting over there. That's maybe a bad analogy, but it's reliable and it's resilient, but latency is not its strong suit. And it can disappear for 2 seconds at a time. Not a big deal if you're just trying to drag a file from one place to another, but it's not fast enough for profile container management. So the only 3 really well-supported things are a file server. There's a whole bunch of problems with file servers too, in that you need to have a really big one to get enough throughput. Different conversation. File servers, Azure Files Premium or Azure NetApp Files. Azure Files Premium and Azure NetApp Files have very similar pricing models. They just do. The main difference is that Azure NetApp Files supports more protocols, more applications, other things like global file cache that are super powerful and really interesting outside of WVD, but it starts at 4 terabytes. So you're at $600 a month to get into Azure NetApp Files, period. So if you're a small deployment, that can be cost prohibitive. Azure Files Premium, you can get in at 100 gig, and it's like 18 cents a gig, which sounds like a lot, but there's no licensing, no servers, no other stuff, no transfer costs at all with premium storage. Other thing, this is a big part of why we use the pricing calculator to help you come up with what it's going to cost, because it takes into account all of this stuff that we've been talking about, and you do have to look at everything to get a good solid picture of the deployment. So coming back around, if your regular Azure Files is standard and not premium, that's the first thing to fix. Unless you have if you have 4 terabytes or more there, we should really be talking about Azure NetApp Files.
Yeah. Let's see, one more question back about the Apple question. He asked, we have Windows and Mac computer labs, and students need to connect to both remotely, and then in parentheses, because WVD cannot run Mac OS apps. So that's what you would hit on earlier. You have to have like a Mac emulator or something else going.
Yep.
Because WVD is running Windows 10, it's not running Mac OS.
That's right. Now, this is a way edge case. So you can with VDS. So VDS does more than WVD, the NetApp tool. It actually runs in any cloud, on-premise, and it also runs other operating systems. You could potentially, and I've never done this is just top of my head, we could possibly set you up with a VDS deployment that with VDS, it would centralize access to a Mac terminal server environment of sorts right next to WVD. We can maybe clean that up a little bit, but there's just no way for I've never looked, I don't even know if we can do Linux on WVD only because the Linux subsystem is built into Windows now. So that we can do. Mac is built on a really weird forked version of BOSD that's kind of Linux-y-ish. I don't know if somebody's made an emulator that would run Mac apps a little bit slower on Windows. I have no idea if that's been done. If that exists, it would probably work in WVD. this is definitely an off-topic sort of thing to explore.
And we're getting to the top of the hour, so I know people are going to drop. One more question. We got it's two questions in one. With WVD, how do we connect to WVD? Connect to on-premise environments, and then what to do about like line of business systems like ERP systems,
Perfect.
And then what about printing and scanning?
Okay, printing and scanning is basically same as it's always been. It's RDP. As long as your printer drivers aren't weird, we can make it work. Microsoft has launched a new service this year that is not fully out yet. They've basically launched their own cloud printing service, kind of like Google used to have. My thought is they're doing this specifically because they want to eliminate that whole driver weirdness from the conversation completely by using a cloud print environment. So I think that's where they're going with that. WVD does not just automatically magically fix printing and scanning issues that you've ever had with remote in the past. Luckily, almost all USB stuff is redirected well anyway. You know, old scanners and stuff, I don't even know who still does that, but there are going to be edge case uses where those are still going to be a problem. Not very many, but they're still out there. This is not a magic bullet for that. On the other side, that's far more important, but I forgot what the question was already. Was it, on-premise. So two ways. The most popular way to do it is go ahead and have a site-to-site VPN between Azure and your local environment. That works fine unless you have a low latency requirements in your line of business applications. In that case, now we look at something called global file cache, which is a feature of Azure NetApp files. What that does is it gives you global, and this isn't a big deal for our engineering customers, that gives you global file locking across huge files of all kinds of different types in one place. So if you have, and it's synchronized between your on-premise location and the Azure cloud. So you essentially have two copies of that 150 meg AutoCAD file is in both places. Global file cache keeps them in sync, and it also locks it so that if you have a WVD workstation that grabs the cloud version of the file, but somebody else is on-prem and wants to grab it, they won't be able to because they know it's locked up here. It's a simple thing, but that's how we get around the latency issue of having files on-prem or in the cloud, but it still allow people to work with them simultaneously. And that is a great solution for that. But the easy thing for people to do is just a VPN between the two. And as long as you don't have really low latency requirements, that works fine.
So I wanted to keep asking questions, which Mike and I can, but Mike, maybe if you want to put up the last slide. I know some people are starting to bounce off.
Right, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I mean, basically, there's not much here. I mean, the only other, this is all stuff, it'll be in there. This is just, again, a slide with all of our contact information. So nothing anybody cares about other than this. So let's go ahead and ask questions as long as people want to hang out. But anybody else that has to jump, thank you for attending. You'll get a copy of the slides. And anyone else will be here as long as there's still people on the line.
Yep. Again, thanks everybody. And Mike, thanks for recapping that. We still have a number of people on asking questions, so let's keep asking questions.
All right.
Can we move from a traditional Microsoft client server environment, Windows Server 2008 R2, to Azure WVD without network environment assessment?
Well, yes. You know, we do a lot of assessments here. They're easy to price. We tell you what it costs. If it takes us too long, it's our fault. But it's people can jump in without being afraid someone's going to pull the covers back, find a massive rat's nest, and they're going to cost them $30,000 to find out what the problem is. So we do a lot of assessments to specifically, you know, look for problems at a low risk, kind of a low risk way for our clients to do that. However, that being said, I mean, you can. It comes down to how comfortable you are with your environment. If you know that you're not going to find a bunch of nightmare setups, then we can go ahead and do it. One thing we should talk about real quick, and this is a little bit off topic. If you have Windows 7, I should have put this in the presentation. Windows 7 environments automatically receive 3 years of extended service updates when we run it in WVD. So I know I talked about this being Windows 10, Windows 10, Windows 10. WVD does work with Windows 7. And not only does it work with Windows 7, it's supported by Microsoft for 3 years beyond the, so 2 more years now, but 3 years beyond the date of Windows 7 support. So it is a way to get your Windows 7 applications up and running with support without having to jump through a bunch of hoops or buy ESU licenses from Microsoft.
Right.
Anyway, sorry about that. But your 2000,
and then for the 2008 system, that can also move. We can move it, that VM, to Azure and get the same.
Yeah, exactly.
3 years.
So with WVD is really just the desktop piece, but it lives in Azure right next to the rest of your stuff. So we're putting up 2008 R2 servers that are supported in Azure. In fact, 2008 is the only way we can put a supported 32-bit Windows server in Azure is by using 2008. That's a neat little last get out of jail card for people that have 32-bit applications that haven't modernized, and we can still get them into the cloud. And it's the only way to do it. You can't pull down a fresh image of anything else that is supported in Azure, that everything is 64-bit except for that.
Okay, and then back to the VPN question for the line of business app. Their line of business app is using Microsoft SQL Server, and I responded that one, we can connect, obviously, as you mentioned, you can connect to it site-to-site VPN for WVD or potentially that line of business app might be able to get moved to Azure, which is in line with the other questions we've had.
Yeah, so with SQL and other applications that require a low latency, designed for LAN, client server arrangement, this is where we decide how do we want to do it. Most of the time, the decision is made to put the server in Azure, have everybody connect with WVD, and then for at least that application. So another thing to keep in mind with WVD is you don't have to present the entire desktop. You can present and this is touched on but not expanded on in the presentation. Your WVD can be a WVD application, not a desktop. So as opposed to a full desktop. So you could just extend, let's call your SQL app, whatever it is. Your users, maybe they've got a traditional environment, everything's on their local desktop, either at home or in the office, whatever it is, but they've got an icon on the screen, which is for your inventory application. And it's a client server inventory application. When they click that desktop, it opens the application in a window on their screen. What they don't know is that is actually a WVD session connecting to that client of the client server application running in WVD. They're just getting a window to the client. So even though they have a fully resizable separate window for that application, it's really a WVD session that's only exposing one app. And that's generally how we do those. They're a little bit involved. We've now got to migrate your SQL environments and everything goes along with it to the cloud. But that's how we handle that kind of stuff most of the time. There's other stuff to take into consideration, but that's the most popular way to do it.
And then another question is, can we install our own specific software on WVD?
Absolutely, you're expected. I mean, so with WVD, Microsoft gives you a handful of images right out of the box. They give you Windows 10 image blank, and then they give you a Windows 10 image with Microsoft 365 applications built in. What we do as part of the build is we take that image, we install all your applications that you want, anything you want, and then you save that image, and it goes into your WVD catalog, and that is the image that is used whenever if WVD needs to spin up additional hosts for capacity or whatever the case may be, that's the one that is grabbed. So we almost always customize the application. And once the host is up and running, people with the right permissions in your company can go ahead and install applications on them, and they will be there for all your users to take advantage of.
And I also replied to this person that different groups or individuals can be assigned different collections of software.
That's right. We have application pools and host pools. There's methodologies and mechanisms built into the product and enhanced by VDS to a certain degree that handle all of this kind of in the weeds IT management stuff.
Next question is, do you support persistent and non-persistent WVD?
So depends on how we want to use the term persistent. If we're using it the way that I use it, which might be wrong, it is persistent in that if you go on there and set the background to a picture of your kids and then come back a week later and log back in, it's still a picture of your kids. So it is persistent by design. In order to make it non-persistent, you can do it. We just have to, it's a configuration to tell it to forget everything. And the only reason people really do, well, I can't say only. The reason I think of that people do that is if they're really, really trying to clamp down on the storage, or if they've got 3,000 users that may never do anything, and they're never going to customize it. They're going to use an application, WVD, and then go away and then come back, and they're not going to use it like a desktop. It's just a remote way to get to a thing. Then we would go ahead and set it as in persistent so that you're not wasting resources saving all those profiles.
And another way some people think of persistent is, does it always stay on? And the answer is it can, but then there's costs incurred while it's always on.
You can. There's no benefit to that per se. There's another way that people sometimes kind of use it, which would be if you mix persistent and dedicated. Host pools, which is what determines you as a user what you're going to log on to when you log on. And by the way, a user can have as many access to as many host pools as you want to give them. But we can have dedicated host pools. What that means is for our engineering customers, sometimes they will have a small number of expensive GPU-enabled machines that they use for their AutoCAD work, and that's a dedicated host pool. What that means is when they access it, they're being lit up on one host. Nobody else is going to get on. So when they're in that session, they are the only ones that have access to the resources of that machine behind the scenes. And you can have host pools that are set up that every time a new user log on, you get a new machine, new machine, new machine. It's an inefficient and expensive way to give them the absolute highest performance.
Yep.
And then maybe they have another host pool they use for their regular daily office work, and there could be 2, 4, 10, 20 people sharing that box, all depending on how we configure it or how you configure it based on performance requirements.
And this goes back to your earlier comments on cost, how to cost this. It depends on these different scenarios, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Perfect. Well, we have, I think, reached the end of our questions.
All right.
I'm going through them all now, but I'm pretty sure I got to all of them. If not, again, like Mike said, we'll be following up with the presentation by email. So you get the presentation, you got all of our contact information here. And if one more question, can you control access to external websites?
Yes, I'm trying to think. I mean, the best way to think about this is that this is a Windows machine. Your user, you can do anything. So group policy is a big deal in WVD if you want it to be. A lot of stuff is done and can be done through group policy. So if you can do it with GPOs in a regular environment, you can do it on WVD.
And if we integrate things in the Microsoft 365 world of Intune and Cloud App Security.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're using the modern way of managing, I immediately jump back to old school, but if you're using the modern way of managing what users have access to and controlling their behaviors that way, that all works clearly as well too. So yeah, you're not giving up any Windows functionality that I can think of by using WVD over a physical desktop other than being able to touch the machine.
Yeah, Mike and I will sometimes go to our old school way. We've been doing this for a long time. But the new school way is leveraging these modern tools like Intune, no longer using WebSense, but using Intune, using Cloud App Security and other tools built into the Microsoft 365 suite to give you the full management of your Windows environment, whether it's Windows Virtual Desktop or Windows on a computer. You get to control a lot of those settings. Yep. And with that, I think we're at the end of our questions. Oh, one more. When shall we have the recording of this? We'll get it out at the end of this week, and then the slides will be out at the end of this week, and then the recording will go up as quickly as we can get the recording on our website, and you'll have all that information from our team that sends out the connection information. Yep. And if you want to talk with us afterwards, again, you've got Mike's contact information. In the slide, you've got the person Chuck who invited you, and then you'll hear from our team by email, and you can always find us on our website and LinkedIn and anywhere else. Yep. So with that, everybody's bidding adieu. So thanks everybody. I'm going to give a good wave goodbye. Thanks Mike for doing a great job, and we'll see you at our next webinar in 2 weeks. All right, bye everybody.